Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have our seventh event for discussion. We call it Conversations from the Latin America and Caribbean Transport Working Group under the Connectivity Conservation Specialist Group of the World Commission on Protected Areas from the IUCN. So during this event today, we will have a speaker from Belize, Celso Poot. He is the managing director of the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center. So he will share with us his experience and his work regarding roads, wildlife, and connectivity in Belize, current actions and emerging needs. So thank you all for joining.
Of this, about 20% of this is paved, which represents just over 1,000 kilometers of roads. There are 5 major highways in Belize, and these are single lane highways. And we have in the north, we have the Philip Golson Highway, formerly called the Northern Highway. In the center to the west, we have the George Price Highway, formerly known as the Western Highway. Then we have the Hummingbird Highway, the Southern Highway, now known as the Thomas Vincent Ramos Highway. And the most recently constructed highway is the Coastal Plain Highway. The busiest highway in Belize is the George Price Highway. This connects commerce between Belize City and the rest of the country, especially in the west and in the southern part of the country. The annual average daily traffic for the George Price Highway was estimated at around 4,400 in 2023. It's projected to increase to 8,500 in 10 years and 13,800 in the next 20 years. So we're expecting rapid growth in vehicle density on the highways. And what happens when roads and wildlife habitat intersects? We know that sometimes some of these animals make it across the road successfully, but not all do. We also know that occasionally we will have pregnant animals getting hit on the road. So the mortality is more than just the individual animal that got hit. For example, a pregnant tapir or a pregnant jaguar, like in this case, we have two fetuses or a fully developed tapir calf. And it's not just the big charismatic species that are getting hit, even though those are the ones that are mostly covered by the media in Belize, but we also get the small mesocarnivores getting hit by cars. And really, that is what prompted me to start the Belize Tapir Project. Belize Tapir Project was started back in 2008 as a response to the high incidence of tapir road mortality. There's a specific area in Belize, in central Belize, which the road is a bypass. It connects 2 highways and avoid going into Belize City. Since 2008 to today, I have collected more than 30 tapir carcasses from that section of the highway, which is only about 18 kilometers long. For a species like the tapir, which has a low reproductive rate, those level of mortality can have significant negative impact on the local population of tapirs in that area and also for the country of Belize. So I initially started with monitoring roadkill and realized that there was issue, something was going on out there, and I wanted to help with reducing that level of road mortality that was happening. And so I conducted some spot speed survey in that area and found that speeding was the problem. I mean, tapirs will often get startled, they will freeze when these vehicle lights spot on them at night. And if you're driving 60 miles per hour on dark road, it's very hard for you to see these animals. And so I was able to lobby the government to install some wildlife reflective crossing signs on the Burrell Boom Road. And I complemented that with some awareness campaign. So spending time out on the highway, educating drivers that tapirs are using the road at night. I went out there with the tapir mascot and really call the attention to the users of that highway. What I am pleased to report is that once we did that, we did not record any tapir collision for the next year. So we were able to reduce by installing the signs, but complementing it with an awareness campaign along the road, especially on the weekends when it's busy. The John Smith Road is a new highway. It was opened in September 2020. It was designed to connect the airport, Belize's international airport. We only have one international airport, so to connect that with the George Price Highway for the movement of tourists, especially moving from the highway to inland tourist destination. When they announced the construction of the John Smith Road, we made presentation because we were already doing camera trap work in the area. And we requested that mitigation measures be put in place for tapirs using that area. Unfortunately, they put in some very small box culvert that did not work. Not even for a small mammal it would work. It was probably a meter by a meter. And between November 2020 and June 2021, we recorded 5 tapir road mortality on that road, and it's only 8 kilometers long. So again, I went out and did spot speed survey along the road and noted that drivers were traveling even faster on this new road, up to 128 kilometers per hour. Presented a case to the government and show them where we had suggested that those road underpasses be installed. And thankfully, the minister and the chief executive officer in the Ministry of Infrastructure Development listened with recommendation from their chief engineer, and they were able to install the 3 speed bumps on this highway and also install some tapir crossing signs. Since then, we've only recorded 2 tapir road mortality along the road. I wanted to really have science guide what we were doing. Thankfully, the tapir is the national animal of Belize. So when there is a tapir road mortality, it gets national coverage. And so what I wanted to do was to investigate the effects of human disturbance on tapir occupancy and activity pattern. And this was the essence of my PhD dissertation. And what we found is that, especially during the wet season, when there's an abundance of water and food, tapirs avoid roads. Um, Tapir occupancy increases as the distance from the major roads increase. We know that it wasn't really a novel finding, but it supported the work that we were doing to show that mitigation measures are needed because tapirs are avoiding roads and they might be locked into small isolated forests if the roads are not made wildlife friendly. We also noted that tapirs stayed away from villages. They're more likely in their activity patterns, increases uh, in distances greater than 1 kilometer from road, which was not the same for villages. Like tapirs were active between 500 to 1,000 meters from roads, and other reasons why we could that we can possibly explain for that, including like farming and food trees and why they would hang around uh, villages and stay away from roads. I have been actively involved with the Maya Forest Corridor. The Maya Forest Corridor is the last piece of forest that connects um, Belize's southern forests with the northern forests, which then connects to the greater Selva Maya that is shared between Belize, Mexico, and Guatemala. However, the Maya Forest Corridor is just about 90,000 acres in size. It's a mosaic of uh, land and forests. The challenge is that most of it is privately owned, and it's intersected by two highways, the George Price Highway and the Coastal Plain Highway that was recently constructed. So the Coastal Plain Highway is what the government called a climate resilient highway. It's 58 kilometer and it connects central Belize with southern Belize. It intersects both the Maya Forest Corridor and the Manatee Forest Reserve. So it bisects the connection between the Manatee Forest Reserve and the Maya Forest Corridor. The good thing is that we were able to lobby the government, and this entire highway was fitted with wildlife crossing signs. And so we have more like of dynamic crossing signs because it's not the same, it's not static, it's not the same crossing sign you see every time. So I am pleased that they adopted the tapir crossing sign as one of the main signs on the road, but there are also jaguar signs, there are also deer signs, and so occasionally you will see a tapir sign, and then the next sign would be a jaguar sign, followed by a deer sign, and then that is repeated. So trying to not have it static out there because we know that after a certain time, drivers get used to those signs if they see them on the highway, especially if they travel daily. Um, we were able to lobby the funding agency, which was the British government, for them to include two wildlife underpasses. And sadly, because those wildlife underpasses were an afterthought, during the rainy season, these underpasses are not used by terrestrial mammals, but they're used by crocodiles. They swim in there. Um, but They work because in the dry season of last year, we had this. We had our first jaguar crossing, a mother and a cub, using one of those underpasses when it was dry. So we're able to show the government that these infrastructure work. They just need to be designed properly. The George Price Highway, um, as I said earlier, is Belize's busiest highway. And it really, when we thought we were successful in establishing the corridor, creating all the lands that we needed, the government announced that they're going to upgrade this highway. They're going to make it wider and they're going to increase its height in the name of climate resiliency as well. And we have already recorded some of the more charismatic species being hit by cars, getting killed: jaguars, pumas, tapirs. And so it was a challenge for us. We just completed the connection in the forest, but the road, one of the greatest barrier to wildlife movement, was going to be upgraded. And so we work with engineers and ecologists. We held a webinar in June 2023. We had 42 participants from 7 countries and introduced the concept, the science of road ecology to Belize. It was followed by a 2-day in-person workshop in November 2023, which saw 27 participants from Belize that were supported by Tony Clevenger and Terry McGuire. And we had presentations from both local engineers on the design of the highway, and then we had presentations from biologists, ecologists on concerns on wildlife movement with the highway. The outcome of this workshop was to develop recommendation measures for wildlife-friendly infrastructure at the intersection of the George Price Highway and the Maya Forest Corridor. And that includes site visits to the area. So the Maya Forest Corridor has lost about 60% of its original size in the last 10 years. And so now there's only about 3 miles of connection on the George Price Highway. And so it's imperative that we make sure that there is connectivity. Connectivity is maintained between the forests on either side of the highway. And apart from camera trapping, there were initial works that were done in this area with telemetry, jaguars and gray foxes, and to show how they use this particular segment of the highway and why it is important for us to maintain the connectivity. And so the recommendations we did were for 2 primary underpasses, a 20-meter underpass and a 12-meter underpass, which would be a wet and dry, more like the picture that's coming up. And then some secondary underpasses, tertiary and some quaternary underpasses that we've requested the government to retrofit culverts they had in their plan rather than doing new designs. So this is what we have recommended to the government. So in the area where we have a lot of water, we're looking at the wet dry underpass, and in the main area, we're looking for a 20 meters span of for the underpass as well. It's been a challenge in terms of getting the funding for this. This is the only part of the George Price Highway that the government has not found funding for, and they are actively seeking funding to complete this highway. It should have started in 2023, but to date, they still haven't gotten the funding for it. So it gives us, the conservationists in Belize, some time to to make some recommendation based on science, but also to explore the possibility of working with the government and finding funding to make sure that these infrastructure are put in place. There's a big gap in Belize when it comes to road ecology. It's only recently that some attention has been given to the impacts of roads. During the last 10 years, most of Belize's highway have undergone major upgrades, and but not much emphasis was put into integrating wildlife-friendly road infrastructure. But we don't have a lot of data. We lack data to help guide making these policies and suggesting policies. And so I'm about to launch this roadkill app as a citizen science. This basically, it will be working with tour guides across the country, doing some storytelling in terms of wildlife and wildlife roadkill. The app is going to be a very powerful tool. Just from the beta phase that we're running right now, we can see where the districts with wildlife collision, we can see the highways that that we're recording, and we can also do some analytics behind the scenes to compare the highways and see which one has higher incidence of road mortality. Of course, we can show heat maps as well to show these hotspots area of road collision by species, and aggregate the species as well. This work wouldn't be possible without some of our funders, the Palm Beach Zoo, the Houston Zoo, Belize.com and Belize Digital Media for partnering to create the web app, the Ministry of Infrastructure Development for working with us, the Maya Forest Corridor Trust for all the work they're doing with the Maya Forest Corridor, and of course, the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center for allowing me the time to play on the road. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celso, for your presentation and for sharing with us what's happening in Belize. It's wonderful to have an opportunity to exchange information and learn from each other more. Sometimes we stay so siloed in each country and see similar initiatives and things that we can learn from you. So we now are open for questions. You can ask your questions in Portuguese, in Spanish, and English, and we will ask Celso. So, todos pueden hacer sus preguntas en español, en portugués o en inglés. Pueden hacer en el chat o pueden utilizar la herramienta de la mano y hablar directamente con Celso ahí nos quedamos más interactivos también en nuestra discusión. So the first question we have is from Daniela. She says, "Hi, Celso. Very good. There is evidence of jaguars crossing safely. So she thinks this is the first record of an infant jaguar crossing under a road. So that would also be interesting if anyone has more information about that. And she asked if you have recorded sorry, if you have recorded and documented that material and physical damage that were caused by collisions with large mammals in the country.
Interestingly, we have only found one person at a collision site, like with a tapir or with a jaguar, and that person was a policeman. He suggested he reported that the tapir just dashed across the road in front of him, and he couldn't do anything to avoid it. No injury, but there were damages to his little car. We haven't found any other vehicle on the road to say that there were vehicle damage because of collision with tapir or jaguars. And we suspect that because it's at night most of these accidents happen, they're more than likely the big trucks that are moving cargo back and forth. And so damage to those trucks would be minimal compared to smaller cars and SUVs.
So I will also ask a follow-up question on that too. Since we are in that subject of safety, road safety, is there any law in the country that require people to report if they hit an animal, or how is that in the culture? Do people report that, or are people afraid of reporting that because they're afraid of being responsible for that, or even if security company like insurance companies, if they have any type of those records?
Yeah, so Belize only have what we call third party insurance. And so if you hit a tapir, unless you are what we call comprehensive insurance, then the insurance will take care of that. But it's on you. The law in Belize require you to just have minimum is a third party. So not even for yourself, it's for the other person. We have, or I have tried to get information from insurance companies in Belize to see if they have done any claim or any refund for damages caused by accidents with tapir, and they have not. So I've at least reached out to 3 of the bigger insurance companies in Belize, and neither of them have ever paid out for damages caused with wildlife. As it pertains to the law, it is not. I mean, as long as you can prove it's an accident, it's not a crime. It's the same thing like with wildlife conflict. If the animal is of threat to you or your livelihood, you can kill it. So would translate to more or less the same thing in terms of hitting a tapir by accident or a jaguar by accident. We actually had one recently where a driver hit a jaguar and he called and stayed there, and he was surprised that he was not going to be charged for hitting a jaguar. Yeah.
I think I froze for a minute. Sorry. So thank you for your response. It's interesting how we have some small variations in legislation and how people perceive their responsibility across Central America and South America. and how we give less importance, I would say, for road safety in relation to mitigation, and we have less investment in mitigation compared to Europe and United States, focusing on safety with that focus. And then we look more into the biodiversity conservation perspective many times. So we have another question from Alan. Greetings from Mexico. The efforts you have made with the tapir are interesting. Congratulations. My question is whether you have tried to encourage the use of wildlife crossings, for example, with the use of artificial ponds, drinking throughs, etc., and whether you have considered working together with restoration efforts in already impacted sites to increase connectivity between patches of vegetation.
So we haven't done any work per se in terms of putting out artificial ponds and drinking troughs because Belize has a lot of water on the ground. So when you look across the landscape, there is water availability, unlike in Mexico where we know of those incidents of drought where the tapirs were looking for water and people had to put water out for them. So we don't have the need for that in Belize. Though there are incidents where people have put water out just in case. But in terms of the crossings, we have made those recommendations for crossings. And so we are staying on top of that with the government for them to, like, as soon as we hear about a road improvement happening, as soon as we hear about a new road being constructed, we start liaising with the government to see what the plans are. But this is only recent. I mean, the science of road ecology is only recent in Belize. There are only a few of us doing it, with myself leading the charge. Working with restoration efforts. Restoration efforts are very, I would say, they're smaller activities in Belize. We're working more with the connectivity between the larger forest blocks and the Maya Forest Corridor, for example. The Maya Forest Corridor is only a small piece of landscape when you look at the Maya Mountain Massif and the Selva Maya, but it's an important piece to connect the entire Selva Maya in the three countries.
Thank you. Great. So we have plenty of questions. That is great. So our next question is from Minor Sandoval from Guatemala. So he says, excellent work. Greetings from Guatemala. Thank you for the inspiration and example. And the question is there any current work or proposal for aerial wildlife crossings or canopy bridges for arboreal species such as monkeys?
Yes, there are two canopy bridges in the community baboon sanctuary. So that is where they work with the black howler monkey, Alouatta pigra. And that's a very, it's one of the more successful community-based conservation project in the region where these landowners have put aside small parcels of forest in their backyard so that the howler monkey can move across the landscape. And so there are two instances where they have canopy bridges for them to cross. So yes, we have one example at least of that.
That's great. I've heard about that project a few years ago. Saw a few pictures of the howler monkeys crossing. It's great to hear that they are already there. They are still there. So our next question is from Alberto. And he says that you mentioned around 37 tapirs that were road killed. So he asked if you have any population estimates, so like to make it possible to assess the magnitude of the impact of road mortality on at the population level.
Yeah, that is the plan. It's the question everyone asks all the time. So what's the population of tapirs in Belize? So unlike jaguars and other spotted cats, it's not that easy to say we have X amount the number of tapirs in Belize, but it's part of our action plan. I'm also the IUCN Tapir Specialist Group Coordinator for Belize, and one of my objective over the next 2 years, 2.5 years, is to work with everyone in Belize that is working with tapir to get a probable estimate of tapirs in Belize. So we're looking at what is the exact tapir distribution for Belize, and what are the possible population for this species in Belize. There are models that we can use, and so we will work on that. But we don't have one right now.
It would be great to be able to estimate the contribution of road mortality to the fluctuation of the population or reducing it. I hope not, but considering the amount of records that you have, there's probably an important contribution of road mortality. So our next question is from Jennifer. So she asked, how much could costs increase when taking into account the type of infrastructure shown, such as wildlife crossings, in project planning? So a percentage of the project that would be invested in
So
mitigation?
we estimate for the current project that we recommended, it's going to add an additional $4 million to get those infrastructure in place. That is based on the North America expenses. And so we're also working with local engineers to see what the price would look like in Belize dollars to present to the government. Hopefully not too inflated.
And do you have an idea of the proportion of the total project cost?
No, we haven't seen what the cost for that will be with the government for. So the whole highway is broken down into 4 lots.
Mhm.
And we are lot number 3, and so that is the only piece that they haven't found. They haven't secured funding for.
Yeah, that would be an interesting comparison. So Jennifer was mentioning the budget constraints for projects, and usually what I've seen is for uh, uh, a greenfield project, so for a new road, that the mitigation would be a small amount, and usually people pay a lot of attention on the amount for mitigation, but if you compare to the total project cost for a new road, might not be that much. But when we talk about the existing network, then that's a huge challenge because 100% of the cost would be for mitigation if we want improvements. So that might be uh,
For
a big
24
challenge.
for 24 kilometers of road, so the first lot, which is like, so from Belize City to Hattieville, it's 24 kilometers, and that is going to cost 34.5 million US dollars. That's the overall project for that section. So for 24 kilometers, we're looking at 34.5 million US.
Mm.
Yeah.
So our next question is from Oscar. He says, great presentation. Congratulations, Celso. It's very good news that animals are using the wildlife crossings. My question is, when promoting wildlife crossings, do you think that Belize or other countries should also implement special protection measures to prevent them from becoming potential ecological traps? For example, due to the presence of hunters?
Let me see if I get that correct.
I can try to explain. So the idea, so what is he's asking is if so you're promoting with the government doing lobby to get investment in wildlife crossings. And so he's asking if you think that countries, Belize or others, should also think about worrying and putting some measures to avoid hunters to use the wildlife crossings as a trap to hunt animals that are crossing.
In our case, I think it's not necessary because we own the lands where these infrastructure are being recommended for. So on both sides of the highway. So one, the government doesn't need to buy that land. The land is already owned by us. Two, we're already managing that land and we have present on it. So hunters are not an issue for us. It's always a thought of mine that it is a trap where people can go and hunt easily, but I think with education and awareness, you can overcome that fear. People, especially in Belize, where tourism is the number one industry, wildlife is a big part of tourism. Um, and my research has shown that with education, people are more likely to support the conservation of wildlife in Belize. So I would say that education and awareness campaign is needed when you're putting in place these things. So people can understand the importance of connectivity and why those infrastructures are put in place, particularly for animals to move. So it should be like illegal to go and hunt there.
I'm glad that's not a huge problem. But yeah, we should combine wildlife crossings with land management in general. So that's an important message. So the other question we have is from Tramy Gregory. She asked about funding for mitigation. So she asked, do you know which entities are potential funders for the project? The Inter-American Development Bank, perhaps? Have you considered doing a cost-benefit analysis to illustrate to the government how improving wildlife permeability on the road benefits ecosystem service and tourism on a broader scale? And then she says, I'm thinking of the study that looked even at the cost to tourism of grizzly bear losses and improving water permeability on the road, making it more resilient to future rainfall levels and water flows. So decreasing the risk for the infrastructure. Oh, sorry, Trini, she put her camera. She could have asked the question.
Yeah, so in terms of potential donors, they don't have a funder for the project yet. That's the reason they're shopping around. Initially, they were talking about the Kuwaiti government, um, but that hasn't transpired for this particular part. IDB is already looking at another section of the highway, more closer to Belize City. Yes, we have talked climate resilient, water flow, and most importantly, we recommended to the government to improve the K value on the highway, thereby improving human safety. So our original talk with the government was that Belize has a high poverty rate. To invest 10 million Belize dollars in a wildlife crossing project when Belizeans are going to sleep at night without food might not go well with Belizean people. And so we have been talking about the human safety. The last thing we would like is for someone to lose their life because of a wildlife collision, either with a jaguar or a tapir. And then the jaguar, the tapir become the bad species and then get that black eye, and then people start seeing them as the cause of death on the highway. So we've been talking that talk with the government. In terms of putting in numbers, putting in monetary value to those things, we haven't done that yet.
Feel free to comment, Jeremy, if you want.
Yeah, it would be great.
In my experience in different parts of the world, that's obviously the bottom line. The money is what most makes decision makers change their mind about things, or it encourages them to make a change. I'm thinking about an example in Colombia where cutting costs on a specific piece of road, cutting costs has caused the project to be drawn out an extra 20 years, and a lot of people have been injured and died on the road because it was badly designed in the first place. So, I mean, that's a pretty extreme example, but I think a really well done cost benefit analysis, if you take into account all the ecosystem services that are provided by the wildlife, when you allow for good water flows, how important that is to preventing the need for repairs and the need to rebuild bridges and things like that if they're not built for sufficient water flows. You can make a good case that helps with advocacy, showing that, even in a country that in which the standard of living is not extremely high, it's important to build infrastructure well to make it safe for people, safe for wildlife, so that tourism, benefits continue, and then also safe for the road itself so that it doesn't get damaged by water and it continues to serve people's needs into the future. So I don't know, it's not an easy thing to do, but if you can demonstrate the benefit, that what might be the key that would make the government change your mind, or it would help you maybe have an advocacy campaign with the public to encourage government action.
Yeah.
But you've done such amazing work. Sorry, I meant to say that too. Yeah, it's super cool to see this presentation from Belize.
Thank you for that input. I'll see what we can come up with.
So I have my own questions. We are still open for questions. If anyone has another question, please feel free to add to the chat or open your mic. But you mentioned that you are starting a citizen science project and with an app, and it would be interesting. There are many other citizen science projects across South America and Central America, and we have been discussing under our working group to compile and combine into like similar databases and use that data for analysis and prioritizing sites. So that could be a follow-up from this at some point to look into those other projects and even create a group where we can exchange information and lessons learned on each of one of these citizen science projects. So there is one in Colombia, in Argentina, in Costa Rica. They use iNaturally. So there are many others, and it would be really interesting to exchange some information on that regard. Dani, I see your camera is on. Do you want to ask a question? Or no? Okay. Another one that I have. Okay, sorry.
Go on. Say, like in terms of the citizen science, what I have found is that a lot of those, like those Survey 123 and those iNaturalists, they're not as user friendly as if you're working with the general population. You need to create an account, you need to do this, so I have polled like tour guides and like what would make you submit data, and it's like I want something simple. Take a photo and submit it. And so what this app is doing is that it's forcing you to give the location of the roadkill and you submit it. That's it. If you want to include more data, if you want to put the highway, if you want to put the species, if you want to do all of that, you can do that. But we are going to do that in the back end. We were going to confirm that. We're going to do that in the back end. And so it's to make it very simple for anyone to be able to use it. And because it's a progressive web app, you don't need to download anything on your phone, and whether it's iPhone or Android, you can use it. And finally, it can work without internet, without data. So you can take the photo out in the field, and when you get back to where you have internet service, then you submit it. It queues them, and then you submit it. And so we are still working out the kinks, so it's still in beta phase, but it's working perfect.
That is great, that all the reflection on what would work best for the audience. It's really important. Yeah, I know there are some projects that it's more complicated to send information, and others are simpler. It would be interesting to compare those and try to understand what's being making the project successful, or what can be improved. Another question is, like, we have been talking about roads today, and you mentioned the Selva Maya a few times. So I have a question about the plans of expanding the Maya train from Mexico into Belize and Guatemala. If you have any thoughts or comments on that?
That is what prompted me to do my app. So the Prime Minister, the leader of the country, has said that Belize is working with Mexico to have the Tren Maya come into Belize and then go to Guatemala. And when he was asked, well, where is that train going? He had no idea where the train was going. And so he briefly said it would run along existing highways. But to get to Guatemala, you need to cut across forested area. And so that is really what prompted me to start the app, because we need to get ahead of the government in terms of collecting these roadkill data, so we can show where these hotspots are and where mitigations measures are needed if and when the Tren Maya comes to Belize. So it's still talk, but we have already reached out. Myself and the Maya Forest Corridor Trust have already reached out to the Prime Minister and said, hey, when you want to begin planning, we're here to help and give advice in terms of road, wildlife-friendly road infrastructure for that.
That is very important, and I hope some of the lessons learned in Mexico can be applied if this moves forward to other countries, and have a better planning, like following the mitigation hierarchy, avoiding the most important areas, and mitigating where needed. So I really hope that comes through. So one last question, it would be related to the challenges. So you talk about Train Maya a little bit, but challenges in general that you see for Belize, and also what could be applied from what you learn in Belize that could be applied also in other countries, and like a general lessons learned and future challenges.
So one of my biggest challenges when I started with the wildlife crossing signs, they were stolen repeatedly, because it was like a private, it was a personal project. It was supported by the government. The government gave permission, but people saw me out there working and doing it. And until the government really did it themselves, people started respecting it, and it was more official, these signs. The next challenge is that these signs, they're all riddled with bullets. I don't know if you experienced that in your country, but they're all they're all shut up across the country with these wildlife crossing signs. So, and when I had the signs on the Burrell Boom Road, I was maintaining those. The government wasn't. So thankfully, the government has adopted those signs, and now they're responsible for maintaining them. So that was one of my challenge. It's I think to get the government to sit at the table with you is also another challenge. But Belize, I think, is at a good place in terms of our carbon market interests or blue bonds. The government has an idea of the importance of the forests and the ocean, and so we can continue dialogue with them, but that is a big challenge. And so how a couple people mentioned it earlier, it's if we can talk money to them, they will listen. And so always good to do those cost benefit analysis and have them see where the monetary benefits are. They might not see it initially, but if you explain it to them, they'll understand it eventually.
Thank you so much. It's important for us to think about. We have very similar challenges across different countries, so these moments of discussions are really important for us to reflect and identify ways of collaborating or ways of improving our practice day to day. So I think we are about to wrap up. Alberto also added a comment about the train Maya in the chat, mentioning other some of the big issues related to the train is not just the railway, but also the accessory roads that go along the railway, plus barbed wire fence in the right of way, and that the crossings that exist do not cross all those barriers. So that's something important for us to think on other projects as well, that many times we mitigate the road and not the rail, or mitigate the rail and not the road, and they are all parallel, and we have to look at the landscape level to think about mitigation. And
Right.
so if we don't have any other questions, I will wrap up our last gathering from 2025. I will thank Celso so much for your availability, for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us, and all our attendees to be here in December. And that December is crazy for most people, wrapping up things. And next year we will have more. So we are organizing these events once a month. They are usually in Spanish, sometimes in Portuguese, this one in English. So we are trying to accommodate the main language that we speak across Central America and South America. And I also invite you to follow us on social media, follow the Transport Working Group. We have a newsletter where we share information about publications, events. So I also invite you to subscribe to our newsletter. And this recording will be available on YouTube, so everyone will receive the link as well. And I believe that's it. Anyone has any comments?
Just a comment, just to thank Daniela, to recommend Celso and this excellent presentation from Belize. Thanks, Celso and Daniela.
So thank you all, and
It was a
sorry,
pleasure.
Celso. It was a pleasure to have you here, and I hope we keep in touch and exchanging information and learning from each other. So I wish everyone a good end of year. See you all in January.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.